Okay, so these basic sentence notes are notes that cover your basic sentence rules that you should know that sometimes freshmen come into high school still not putting into practice. So I'm just going to quickly, not a lot of annotation because this covers so much. I'm just going to quickly go over these and kind of explain them and make sure, or try to make sure that you understand them better. So for capitalization, there are basic capitalization rules when we're doing sentences. The first rule is that you always capitalize the first letter in a sentence, okay? I think we know that, and you'll notice that A in always is capitalized because it is the first letter in that sentence, okay? And I do that throughout. It stands out. It's pretty jarring if you don't attend to that first basic rule. Sometimes, so here I have a colon. So a colon is the two dots. It's like the eyes of a smiley face if you're doing a smiley face, okay? Not a semicolon. The semicolon is the winky face one. Don't do that, okay? We're talking about a colon, and sometimes you have a colon after words, like I have rule, colon, okay? Now it's usually you capitalize the first letter after a colon. But there are a couple of times when you don't. So when you don't capitalize the first letter after a colon is when it's a list. So she brought 3 things. Okay. Let me actually just type this out here so that you can see. It's easier to type. And I have a colon there. Pancakes, because why wouldn't you bring pancakes? Peanut butter and Nutella. Okay, whoops, Nutella should be capitalized because that's a proper noun. Okay, so here, because this pancakes, peanut butter, Nutella is a list of items, I don't capitalize that P, all right? When an incomplete thought or phrase follows the colon, so she could only think of one thing. More peanut butter, more Nutella. Actually, Nutella is better. Okay, so that right here, more Nutella is an incomplete phrase or thought. So then we have a lowercase m. But sometimes you do capitalize the first letter after a colon. When the first word after the colon obviously is a proper noun. Okay. No, that's not a great example, sorry, because that would be a question mark there. All right, so that's a proper noun, Mary, so capital M. And then the second one is when you have a complete sentence, like always capitalize the first letter. So I can't actually remember what the rule is. I think that's it. Any Fight Club fans out there? So don't talk about Fight Club is a complete sentence. So I would capitalize that D there. All right. The second, okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is our periods, okay? Where to use a period? I mean, some of this is pretty basic. Always put a period or put a period at the end of the sentence if the sentence is a statement, okay? Don't forget that period. I mean, I have lots of periods right here. And this is also kind of basic. Put a question mark at the end of a sentence if the sentence is a question. Okay, so this is a period. This is a question mark. And put an exclamation point at the end of the sentence to show excitement or strong emotion. Just in terms of writing and style, use exclamation points very sparingly, especially if you're writing essays or formal writing. Almost in an essay, I would never use an exclamation point unless you're quoting somebody who is using an exclamation point, because you don't want to overdo it with the emotion. And there was this, I know, meme a while ago, how people talked about how they use exclamation points it's hard when you're writing an email because you want to sound enthusiastic, but then you don't want to sound like you're overdoing it. So how many exclamation points kind of can be a little bit nerve-wracking. But for writing, you don't want to use too many. So I love this. I was going to find the email meme, but then I found this better and I like it better. So for example, if you're saying OMG, one exclamation point, okay, you've made your point. Good, you're excited. 2 or 3, maybe too many, but all right, fine. We know you're really excited and this isn't definitely informal, so we're going to accept it. The yellow, now you're getting into 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's way too many. Stop, don't use this many. Now you just forgot to hit the shift because you're hitting that shift 1 too many times. So just, I think that's a funny way of saying don't use too many exclamation points. Commas. Now I'm going to talk about commas because some people, I think is helpful for a lot of people because a lot of people mess this up. So 2 sentences. So use commas when 2 sentences are joined by coordinating conjunctions. Fanboys. We'll learn more about this later. Okay, so if you have 2 complete thoughts and you do for and nor, but we are actually going to learn about this in another lesson, or yet. So those are our fanboys, okay? And so if you have 2 complete sentences, like I like Nutella and I like peanut butter, you would have a comma after that Nutella. Okay, so I'll write that down just as an example. I like Nutella, comma, and that's my fanboys. I like peanut butter. All right, so that's an example. Let me just write in bold example. Okay, a comma splice is when you have 2 complete thoughts strung together with just a comma. Okay, so when you use a comma to use 2 complete sentences, and you don't also use one of these fanboys, these coordinating conjunctions, that's what we call a comma splice, and teachers will use C/S to say that's a comma splice, you need to fix that. So I went to the mall, comma, it was busy there. Those are 2 complete thoughts. One way to fix that is you could just take that comma, turn it into a period, and then capitalize the first letter in it. Now you've got 2 sentences. You could change that period into a semicolon, or you could add a fanboys after mall in that comma. So there are different ways of fixing that. English teachers don't want to have to bother to tell you all of those different ways. They'll just say comma splice, fix it. Another way to use commas is when a phrase or group of words comes before a main clause. So if you have a dependent clause or a phrase before your main clause in a sentence, you set that off with a comma. So after tomorrow, comma, I will stop eating nachos. Thinking carefully, comma, Peter wrote a letter to his mom, okay? Because he was tired, comma, Peter went to bed. So when you have the main, and these are both the main clauses in the sentence, okay? You have something, a phrase or clause coming before them, and you set those off with commas. Put commas around words, phrases, or clauses that are not essential. We call those non-restrictive to the sentence meaning. So here we call those appositives, which is another lesson also in itself. If you have non-restrictive appositives, so Polly, comma, my cousin from Alaska, comma, is coming to a party. This, my cousin from Alaska, you could really take that out and the sentence still makes sense. So Polly, if I were to just like cross that out, I don't want you anymore. Okay, now we have Polly is coming to the party. We still know who's coming, who the subject is and what they are doing, okay? The appositive in the middle of the commas, my cousin from Alaska, is just extra fun bonus information. Another example, this isn't an appositive, but we left the party, comma, which was kind of boring anyway, comma, very early. So here's just extra information. I could cross that out and say we left the party very early. And so I know that whatever's offset in those commas is actually not necessary. Okay, so it's just another way of using commas. Use commas to introduce dialogue. Don't stress about that too much. It's basically before a direct quote, you could put a comma there. Use comma to separate 3 or more items in a list. That brings us back up to, I'm just going to copy and paste that sentence that I used before, right? The Nutella and the peanut butter. She brought 3 things. Control C. And Control V. Let's try that again. Control V. She brought 3 things: pancakes, peanut butter, and Nutella. Okay. So that is, I have a comma between my 3 things. Now I could have a comma here if I wanted to. And a lot of people do decide to use that comma before that last item. So here I have a list of 3. Pancakes is 1, peanut butter is 2, and Nutella is 3, the last one. That comma before the last item in the list is called an Oxford comma, or serial comma, if you would like to call it that. It is the comma before the last item in the list and before the conjunction. Here, this and is a conjunction, okay? Some people get really opinionated about the Oxford comma. I don't use them personally, but a lot of people do. And they feel like that people who don't use it are awful. Come at me, I guess, I don't know. I just think that you can, if you know how to write effectively, you don't need an Oxford comma. And so I don't use it. So I have examples of an Oxford comma. I put salsa, cheese, and chives on my nachos. The Oxford comma would be this, that there, right there, that comma before the and. And then without it, you just I put salsa, cheese, and chives, no comma there, okay? So the rule there in English is you don't need to use an Oxford comma, but you can if you want. It's really a style choice. If you choose to use an Oxford comma once in a piece of writing, then you need to use it throughout. You've got to be consistent is the only rule, really. So if you use it once, then you have to use the Oxford comma throughout. If you don't use it, then you cannot use it you shouldn't use it in the rest of your writing. I got into a heated argument. One time I was writing this extremely large report on my school that I used to work at, and we were fighting over whether or not we wanted to use in this long report the Oxford comma. And it was important to us because we were both writing large sections of that report, and one of us would have to go through all of our writing and either take it out, take the Oxford comma out, or put it in. So I lost the battle. We ended up leaving the Oxford comma in. So I had to go through every piece of writing that I did for that report and put those Oxford commas in just to be consistent with my coworkers' writing. So sentence fragments, you should know sentence fragments are incomplete sentences. A sentence fragment or incomplete sentence is a sentence that does not express a complete thought. It could be just a phrase or even just words that don't make sense. So because I said so is a sentence fragment because it's just a dependent clause. Sometimes it is because either the subject or verb are missing. So the last test of the semester, here we have no verb. That's just a noun phrase. So that's a sentence fragment, okay? Sometimes this is because even though there's a subject and a verb, the sentence does not express a complete thought and leaves the listener waiting for more. It begins with something called a dependent marker word, which we will learn more about in another lesson. I do talk about clauses. So when I finally took my last test, if I were to just take out that dependent marker word when, I have a complete sentence. I finally took my last test. Leaving that in, I have a thought that is incomplete. Sometimes they're used for certain effect, these sentence fragments, and they develop the voice of the speaker. So for example, because I said so, is very direct, that has a specific effect. It's like very to the point. But it's usually only in less formal or in narrative writing. So Peter showed me how to organize his backpack. Wow, just wow. This wow, just wow, those are fragments. And they're conveying voice there, I would say. The voice typically, especially of like, I would say a teenager or an informal voice, you wouldn't do that in a formal essay that you were writing to an English teacher, an English professor. So, you be careful with that. I understand that you've got a great voice and you're developing a great voice, but you also have to make sure that when the writing requires formality, that you're not using that kind of thing too much. And then run-on sentences are opposite of sentence fragments. Run-on sentences include 2 or more complete thoughts that are not punctuated properly. So an example is I went to the mall, it was very busy here. What Google doesn't like about this is the fact that I need a period and I need to capitalize and make that 2 sentences. I went to the mall, period. It was very busy there. So if you're, you'll every once in a while have somebody who will write an entire paragraph, that's 1 sentence. And that 1 sentence is, all the independent clauses in that sentence are not punctuated properly. So it's very difficult to read and it's jarring. So make sure when you have a complete thought, I went to the mall, that's 1 complete thought. And it was very busy there, that's another complete thought. That's what we call a run-on, and the English teacher will write an R/O. I'll write it over here so you can see it, meaning run on. And you need to, basically, there are lots of things you can do. You could put a semicolon in between them. You could do a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or you could just make them 2 different sentences. The English teacher isn't going to bother and explain that all out to you every time you do a run-on sentence on your essay. So they're just going to write run-on sentence. So those are my basic sentence notes, and hopefully they were helpful.